All right. So on this episode of Empowering Her, I have special guest Geony Rucker. Johnny, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience with us, and just so happy to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to pour into
Yeah,
some young girls.
this is awesome. So let's start with now. I understand that you have your regular 9 to 5, and I'd also like to talk about the nonprofit you're leading because
Yeah,
we don't hear a lot about nonprofits. And so, but let's start about with like what your full time role is,
yeah,
and let's talk about kind of your journey that led you to where you're at.
sure. So I am a senior implementation manager and I focus on email marketing. This is not growing up where I thought I would be. I didn't really know what I wanted to be. Medicine really interested me, but I don't know. I was playing volleyball and that was really where my focus was. So I went to Long Island University in New York for college. After 2 years, I transferred to Mizzou, and then transferred back to New York. So in that entire process, it's like you're having to pick from all these different degrees,
Right.
and you don't even know if that's what you want to do. I was going to graduate on time when I was at Mizzou, and I was majoring in financial planning. And I go to my advisor, and I'm like, "Well, what am I going to do with this?" And she's like, "Well, you could be a financial planner, or you could work for a bank." And verbatim, I was like, ew, I don't want to work for a bank. And then fast forward 5 years, I guess not quite five, fast forward 3 years, and that's exactly where I went. And I ended up loving it. It's just, you have this perception of what you think something's going to be like. It's not necessarily true. You really do have to do your research and give something a try. I never thought I'd like tech, but here I am. I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's that problem solving, but still kind of science minded. How is this going to work best? Could we make this more effective approach to whatever it is that you're doing?
All right. So I like that. And what I really like is how you mentioned that, we have kind of a surface level understanding of, and I think a lot of us are that way. It's a very kind of superficial, for example, if you're looking at maybe recruiting, you might think, oh, well, they just talk to people all day, but there's so much more that goes into that. So and I know that your day is a little bit different every day, but let's go through maybe what a week might look for you as far as activities that you might complete, maybe what objectives that you might have to be
Yeah.
done with.
So, on the implementation side, we're primarily working with people who are new to our software.
Okay.
So, I'm actually working also with our CRM team. So, they're dealing with a different part of our software. And then my focus is the email marketing. So, on my team, we'll be building out different campaigns, meeting with clients and talking to them about what their vision is. Who is it that they want to target? So, for anybody who might not be super familiar with email marketing, what we're basically doing is we're creating a series of messages that can go out to the people who may or may not be interested in working with that bank. So, banks are our clients, mortgage lenders are our clients. And when we're creating these messages, we're basically helping them get more business and we're giving people better insight into who that lender is. Why do I want to work with you? What is it about you that's different from this bank? And in our meetings with those clients, with those banks one on one, that's how we're able to get a sense for that voice that they want to
Mhm.
share. And then we just translate that into the messages and yeah, share who they are.
Okay. And I got love this answer because as a writing teacher, most of my students are like, when will we ever use writing in the real world? And I'm like, well, like, and they don't believe me because I'm and like, no, we're never gonna, why do we have to do all this writing? I'm like, but you're gonna use writing in the real world, whether it's emails, whether it's and so I like how this is what we do. We are writing messages.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We're writing messages. And sometimes the mortgage lenders will provide us with messages
Mhm.
and we revise and edit them. Or they'll say, hey, we don't actually have a copywriter on staff. One of our staff members put this together. Would you mind taking a peek at this? And then I can come in and review everything and then just kind of measure that against our best practices. If you're personalizing this message, how much more effective can it be? Instead of saying, hi, it's hi, Josh. I'm Geony Rucker, and I'm going to be helping you with your refinance, or whatever personalization you can add. It really does make a big difference. But no, they will absolutely need writing. They will need it.
So I heard you say the word copywriting, And how does copywriting look different than, say, I don't know, regular writing?
So copywriting is really when you're creating this message, but it's not just for the message that you might want to write. It's not about what you think. It's about what your client is wanting. So if
Okay.
your client really wants an aggressive, salesy approach, then that's the type of writing you're going to be using.
Uh,
Where I've done sales. I was a loan officer for 5 years, but I hated being called a salesperson because it's not about selling. It's what is it that this person is going to benefit from. So I was pretty successful in sales because that was the approach. I'm not trying to sell you something just to sell you something. I want to find what's going to work. So when it comes to that really aggressive, persuasive, let's work together, you need to call me today type message, that is not my style. But if that's what the client is wanting, then I have to kind of put that helmet on as I'm writing that type of copy to make sure that their message is getting across. I can't filter their message through what I think it should be because that's what works for them. So it's more being that conduit to make sure that their message is getting across.
Got it. Love it. So now, um, for somebody that wanted to go into implementation, would they need a college degree to get into implementation?
So I would say it would help you get there more quickly if you went the college degree route, but I don't think you necessarily need a college degree.
Okay.
My degree's in economics, and that is not what I am using in implementation. So sometimes they like to see that you have a degree, and it doesn't necessarily matter that it's related.
Hmm.
However, had I had a marketing degree, it's possible that I could have jumped into this a lot sooner than had I gone the economics route.
Okay, awesome. And it's been kind of interesting to see, like if you look at some job descriptions, obviously, if you want to be, a nurse, if you want to be a lawyer, you have to get that specific degree. But
Right,
it's
absolutely.
we see on some where it's like they just want you to have like a 4-year degree, and so it's kind of interesting where you're like, well, is really the degree that, and I hate to sound like don't go to college, but
Right.
is a degree really that valuable if they don't even care? Like my degree is in underwater basket weaving. So like, did I really need to go to college for this job? But let's talk about your nonprofit.
Oh yeah. Oh, oh, love it. It is Value Unconditional, and we exist to help people heal from trauma using God's word. So, at the pace people are ready to receive it, they can come to us and set up either a processing group for maybe their church or one on one sessions where we're doing that spiritual mentoring and really helping them tackle those hard questions that they might not necessarily feel safe asking someone else. They might not feel
Okay.
comfortable asking their pastor. But after we go through hard life things, it's really, really important that we don't try to carry that weight by ourselves. There has to be a safe person that we can reach out to. And that's what Value Unconditional does. We want to be that trauma-informed, faith-based resource where people can ask us the hard stuff that they just can't ask anywhere else.
Where did you come up with the inspiration for this idea?
Yeah. So, potential trigger. When I was a freshman in college, I had a really, really tough experience that I didn't know who to go to with that. I was playing college volleyball on the opposite side of the United States. So I'm originally from Arizona, but I
Okay.
was going to college in New York. And I didn't really want to tell my coach. I loved my coach, but I was a freshman and
Yeah.
I didn't want to be the new girl on the team who's causing trouble because she's saying this and that. So I didn't want to say anything there. I didn't want to tell my parents. I'm an only child, so I didn't want them to be more stressed that I'm on the opposite side of America. And then be calling me constantly or wanting me to come home because I wanted to stay. I loved my school, I loved my team, but I was dealing with hard stuff that I just didn't really know who to talk to, or where to even start, what that looked like. And after a couple of years of trying different things and trying to talk to different people and trying to carry it on my own and realizing I totally couldn't, I realized the people who understood the hard stuff I was dealing with didn't understand my hard God questions. And the people who understood my hard God questions would say some really harmful things about the trauma, because they
Mhm.
just didn't understand. It was like there was no place that I could find both.
Oh,
And lo and behold, I end up just on this journey, end up meeting this woman named Pam Brown, who is now our executive director. She oversees all of our restorative services. But it's been an incredible journey. We've been able to help a ton of people. We provided like 417 hours of one-on-one spiritual mentoring sessions last year.
okay.
So it's been really, really rewarding because at the end of the day, I love my job as a senior implementation manager. I love marketing. I think it's a blast. Even selling loans was a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, you are so much more than what you do from 9 to 5. You are so much more than your title or your role. Oh, yay, you're finally an executive. But is that going to fulfill you?
Right.
Um, your life is about so much more than that, which is why I think it's really cool that you were doing this. It's easy to go through the motions of your job, but there's so much more meaning when you're able to pour into people in a way that you're able to use the gifts that you have that are
Right.
specific to you that someone else really needs. Like other people are really benefiting from whatever it is that you have.
Right.
So just making sure that regardless of what job they choose, regardless of what job you choose, you are being intentional about knowing that your life has so much more behind just what you do to make a living.
This kind of two things here. I like how you said that you're so much more than your title, because one of the things, and I don't know if this is, you know, happens frequently outside the United States, but I know in the United States, if you and I were to meet for the first time, and you say, "Hey, tell me about yourself," like the very first thing that I'm going to pop off with is I'm a, and
Right,
so my whole identity is kind of wrapped up in, what my job title is. I'm a teacher. I'm a banker.
right,
And, um, and so what's interesting is we see that sometimes when people lose their jobs, they can almost get into a state of depression because they feel part of their identity. So they feel like they have lost themselves when they lose a job.
right. No,
And
absolutely. And you see that a lot with athletes.
yeah.
I played volleyball. I played college volleyball at LIU, Long Island University, and then I was a walk-on at Mizzou my junior year,
Mhm.
and then back to LIU. Having that athlete title everywhere you go for over 10 years, and then you come out of college and you're no longer an athlete, and then you try to use that in your job interviews because there is so much to be gained from it. But at the same time, when you're really stepping outside of that role, it can be tough to recognize like, "Oh, wait, who am I now? Wait,
Right.
no, I've it's been volleyball player for so long. What is it today? Like what am I bringing to the table?" Because unless you're intentional, it can be really, really tough to not make that your identity, make that who you are.
Well, and one thing that's been really interesting, depending on what career field that you're in, you can be very almost insulated from other career fields. For example, if you are a nurse, you're very insulated into the medical community. You don't know what's going on,
Right,
and like in teaching, just trying when we sat down to try and translate our resume and like our day to day into another role was very, very difficult. And so, you have to learn to, a friend of mine said, he said, "Hey, Josh, listen," he goes, "stop referring to yourself as a job title, because all you are is you're a set of skills that you have accumulated in order to meet objectives." And
right.
he goes, and that is for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're an anesthesiologist, if you are a marketer, if you're a sales or teacher. Stop thinking of yourself as a title, but more as a accumulated skill set in order to reach objectives, which then kind of helps to remove that your identity being wrapped up in what you do every day.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and it's so important because you might try lots of different things,
Mm,
and your value isn't limited based on what those titles look like. So
right.
often you'll hear people not want to take entry level positions because it's like, no, I'm better than that. No, that's below me. No, that's but it's so much more than just what that title is. When you have a lot to offer, you're your entry level role title isn't going to limit you. People will see your work ethic
Right.
and the way that you treat other people. They will see that and they will recognize it. And it is incredible how many jobs you might find open up when it's, we haven't posted this yet, but we've been thinking about blah, blah, blah. Would this be something you'd be interested in?
Right.
Is this something you'd be open to consider? It might be coming up in 6 months or a year. If you're interested, maybe you could apply then. There's so many more conversations to be had when you are working hard and you are being good to people. Good things have a really good way of finding you.
You know, excuse me. This is really, really interesting that you brought this up because um, I had made a post on LinkedIn about there was some, there were some people that were saying that, shouldn't have to take entry level jobs. It's an insult and stuff. And I'm like, well, entry level is not, I think we have a bad, what we think badly of entry level. Entry
Right.
level just means I don't understand your tech stack. I need time to understand it. Entry level just means this is a brand new industry that I'm stepping into.
Exactly.
And so I love how you said that because, especially with like my fellow teachers that were kind of some of them very upset about the whole stepping into an entry level. And I said, well, listen, I said, even if somebody was a professional and they were educated, if they decided to become a teacher, where do they start? At step zero. And so when you step into that entry level, if you work hard and you show that you're smart, you will get promoted very fast or it opens up those other opportunities. So sometimes taking that plus entry level, it allows you the time to breathe and learn without somebody on your back going, hey, listen, you said you could do, junior and
Right.
senior level work, come on, let's do it.
Yep. No, absolutely. And when your skills are showing through, it wouldn't be too surprising for your manager to come up and be like, I think you might be a little overqualified for this. Look at you. You're absolutely killing this. I think there might be another role that could be a good fit for you
Yeah.
if those skills are translating that easily. But another thing to consider is that entry level doesn't mean you're not going to make good money.
Right.
You can be an entry level loan officer and make six figures. So, also really considering what that mentality is behind not wanting that entry level. It in no way diminishes your value or your skill set just because you're starting out in a new industry. That's just step one.
So I'm curious, going back to your nonprofit, just a curious question out. Are you seeing more males or females that are seeking out your service? And the reason why I ask this is we have a tendency to encourage women to confide in others, but we tend to tell men like, "Listen, suck it up. Boys don't cry. If you show your feelings, you're kind of weak." And so, that of course leads to other horrible problems down the road.
Right,
So, are you seeing, or is it kind of 50-50, or is it just kind of
right.
depends?
Uh, Quick note, if boys were not supposed to cry, God would not have given them tear ducts. They have tear ducts. It's okay. We all have to cry and express things that we're dealing with in different ways. But we do see a majority of women. However, demand was so high for men that we had to open up and expand our services back in March of 2020. So when the pandemic hit, that year in 2020, we actually tripled our services
Wow.
as compared to the year prior because there were so many people reaching out for help. You can only carry so many heavy things
Yeah.
before you need to set something down. And what people were realizing was there's this thing that's been buried for a really long time, this really heavy, big, bad thing that I don't tell anyone. And then there's all these like smaller stressors, still some heavy things, but not quite this heavy.
Right.
And the more they stacked on there, the more this heavy thing just kept coming to the surface. And it was like everything else was bubbling over. And it came to a point that they had to address that big, heavy thing that they'd been running from for whatever reason, because they just didn't have a safe place where they could reach out. So back in 2020, in March, we'd been receiving so many requests. Hey, can you work with men? Hey, would you be open to working with my brother or my cousin or whoever? And it got to a point that we had to discuss internally and expand our services, that it wasn't only going to be for women, it is going to be for men. A majority of the people that we serve are women, but we absolutely have male clients that reach out.
So, how did you, and I'm not sure how the funding works for this,
Yeah.
but um, do the clients pay for the service, or how did you find funding in order to, two questions here, because I kind of have my own stuff brewing in the background, is
Yeah.
how were you able to find funding for this, and how did you do the marketing for the outreach to make people aware that this is a program that's available?
Yeah. So this might sound kind of funny. I did not want to start a nonprofit. I did not want to do that. But I just kept felt God putting it on my heart. And I just argued with him. And I'm like, look, I will do the work that you are calling me to do, but I don't want to take all these steps and do paperwork and do all this stuff when like this isn't what I want to do. So I just started doing the work, had Pam, and a big part of our focus was education for churches
Mm,
initially. Is we are going to teach churches how to have a trauma informed approach. When someone from their congregation comes to them and says, "Hey, my spouse is abusive. Hey, this happened to me over the weekend. Hey, I'm in this type of relationship and they just don't talk nice to me. And I don't know what to do with this." Instead of getting really stressed or overwhelmed or kind of anxious about having those conversations, it's how can we prepare them with the right tools so that you don't have to go into a full blown counseling session here, but you can have a compassionate, trauma informed response so that this person knows that it's not their fault that this happened to them or that they're going through this. They feel like they're supported, and you can provide them with a resource who can provide further help. So that was kind of the education start that evolved through Pam into more of the restorative services. So now they work side by side. But when all of this started, I was just really kind of wrestling with God on that I know this is what you want me to do, but I don't want to do this. And it turned into yet again this situation where I thought it wouldn't be something that I loved, but I absolutely love doing this work. So we officially became incorporated with the state back in 2018, and then got our tax exempt status not long after. But we had been doing the work since February 2016.
yeah.
So that was kind of the starting ground for that. When it came to funding, because I wasn't planning on doing this as an actual nonprofit, we weren't seeking out funding. It ended up taking place that so many people just believed in what we were doing, so they would make donations. And it just kind of evolved and grew from there. And from that point, you can start considering what the charitable giving looks like for different companies or big corporations. So with banks, some of them are really invested in like financial education or just different elements of poverty and breaking cycles of poverty, or also like healthy living overall.
Mm,
So obviously financial health is really important, but because that is one aspect of the overall health, they might invest in something that is focused on creating a whole healthy person. So just really looking into what opportunities are out there for grants and building relationships. That mentor aspect, you cannot beat having someone who's already there tell you how to get there. And the same thing goes whether you're in tech or marketing technology, or if you are a nonprofit. You really do need those people who can help you get the places that you don't know where to go. If you were going to go on a safari in Africa, you wouldn't just start driving. You would look out for a guide, someone who can get you where you're trying to go.
right.
That's not unreasonable. That's absolutely something that we should all consider doing regardless of where we're trying to get.
Okay. Beautiful. So, on the this is one question that is very, very important to the students, and it's salary considerations. So, for somebody that wants to do like email marketing, kind of the implementation side, what might a salary range look like, kind of starting into the role, and then
Yeah.
are you capable of making six figures in that role?
Yes, you are
Okay.
able to make six figures in the role. When you're starting out in marketing, some of the entry level jobs, depending on what you're doing, would pay lower.
Mm.
But if you transition from something that's related, so for example, like if you start out as a loan officer, you can make great money entry level and then transition into marketing where it's still related.
Gotcha.
With that transition, you'd probably start out in like the 60 to 75 range. And then as you continue to move up, there's people in marketing who are making well over
Yeah.
$150,000 a year. And you get to do so many fun things. Like you get to be creative, but also work with numbers. And one thing I would say for anybody who would be considering marketing, know that it is not only creative. You only know your message works if you can look at the data behind it and
Oh, yeah.
say that this is working or this is not working. It is all about the data that tells you whether or not your marketing is doing what you want it to do. And then you make little tweaks and see if now the marketing is doing what you want it to do. So that's just an important thing that I wish I would have recognized when I was in college majoring in marketing.
Well, and I think there's, if you're not familiar with marketing, I think sometimes you can almost confuse. You think of marketing more as the advertising side, where you're just like creating cool ads and stuff, and then, but then you like, hey, how do we even know this campaign is going to work? How do we know?
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do is spend a ton of money on a campaign and then not get any. They'll cut that marketing budget real fast, but. Um, you know, you are in such a kind of a mentorship position with your nonprofit. So, and I think it's a beautiful thing. So let's talk about the importance of mentorship and kind of what is your definition of mentorship?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even starting out with volleyball, my coaches were mentors. It's like this mentor is this person that it's like a role model, but instead of it just being someone you look up to, it's someone who turns around and says, "Let me help you get here too."
I like it.
So it's you obviously aren't going to seek out mentorship from someone that you don't admire or um, want your life to resemble in some
Mhm.
ways. When they are willing to pour into you, it's so encouraging to have somebody that you believe in and admire also believe in you. And it's so much easier to have them introduce you to people that you don't know you need to know. There's so much about relationships that are really, really pivotal in just making that successful journey so much more quickly. So having somebody who can just make that connection. Hey, let's go to lunch. Hey,
Mhm.
let's go to coffee. I want to introduce you to so and so. And who knows what comes from that. But once you're having those conversations, so much more takes place that you would have been missing out on had you not been willing to learn from someone who has already been there, who's already doing the work.
Like it. Okay. So I have one last question for you.
Yeah,
Knowing what you know now, and your answer doesn't have to be career, it doesn't have to be education,
right.
it can be anything you want. But knowing what you know now, what is one piece of advice you would give to yourself back in middle school or high school?
Your value is unconditional.
Oh, I like it.
No matter anything that crosses your path, anything that happens to you, any way people talk to you or treat you, um, no matter what grade you end up getting on that test that you worked so hard for, those things don't determine your value. Your value is so much bigger than that. Your value is bigger than your title or your role. Your life purpose matters. So yeah, that was absolutely what I would say. Your value is unconditional.
I love that. It's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and just I love that we were able to kind of hit a twofer. We're able to talk about
Yeah,
the nonprofit because it just does go to show you that sometimes um, your heart will show you where you were led later. Sometimes we stumble into things, and it's important to kind of listen to your gut to find that happiness. So I absolutely love what you're doing.
thank you so much. I love it too. It's a lot of fun. And I definitely stumbled and fell into marketing technology. And I could not imagine doing something outside of nonprofit that I would enjoy more than what I do.
Very, very awesome.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you so much
Well,
for having me.
you're welcome. Thank you for being here, and we'll chat soon.
Alrighty. Thank you, Josh.